Welcome, everyone, to our session on free speech rights. No, free speech, keeping free speech free, know your rights will workshop. And really happy to have you here. I'm happy to welcome Anita Rios and Terry Lodge to the session. And I hope you enjoy it. And I'm just going to turn the time right over to them so we can get started.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anita Rios, and I'm with the Latinx Caucus. And my friend Terry Lodge is also here. I'm trying to move a little bit of stuff so that things aren't blocked for me. Um, okay, so I wanted to explain a little bit about why we decided to have this workshop and to share with you that we were starting to get very nervous with what was happening with how people were being treated with their discussions and their opposition to the war in Gaza. And one of our co-chairs was actually arrested, and he was charged with a hate crime for saying, making some comments about the genocide in Gaza. And that had a very chilling effect. He actually stepped back as co-chair. And this was really frightening. He was initially questioned by the FBI, and they came to his door, and we tried to help him with some resources for what to do about that. We suggested that he reach out to the National Lawyers Guild. So anyway, that was the genesis of our starting to have this discussion, because we figured that this was a situation that other people were going to be in. But there's other situations, other free speech situations that we as Greens, as we go about our activism, um, have to engage in, such as when you're petitioning. Many of us participate in demonstrations. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that. Also, the Greens would not exist without the internet. So lots of us are on the internet, and we make comments, and we have a presence there. And it is really important that, one, we push boundaries, and two, we know what those boundaries are, so that we keep ourselves safe and keep the people that we're working with safe as well. So first, a little bit about petitioning. When we do ballot access, and when we do petitioning for our candidates, that is constitutionally protected activity. So that's what enables us to be able to go door to door or stand in public places with our petitions. And we do that. But sometimes the laws are very restrictive. You can always go door to door. You can petition in public places, but oftentimes you can't petition in private places. Well, you actually can't, but a lot of times you can get away with it. They just don't catch you. But still, that's constitutionally protected activity. That doesn't mean that that cop that walks up to you and tells you you can't be here, even though you're in a public place. I mean, this has happened to me. I've been on outside a city hall or the government center, and in a public plaza, and been told you can't be here, you can't circulate petitions here. That doesn't mean that they know what the law is. And sometimes you can push back and get away with it. I have frequently pushed back. I mean, one of my standard lines is, go ahead and arrest me. I'm doing what is legal. But in a way, I don't encourage people to do that. I mean, do what's comfortable for you. as a person of color, I will tell you, I have never been arrested, and I am afraid to be arrested because we have to know that the statistics for people of color in dealing with the police are very ugly. Those are real statistics. You really can get hurt, not just for people of color, but particularly for people of color. So everybody has to make their own judgment as to how much they push back. A lot of times there's a bigger picture too. And when you're petitioning, when you're trying to gather signatures, you want to get as many signatures as possible. And you also don't want to waste time being in jail. You want to be out there again tomorrow or the next day. So looking at the bigger picture, maybe what you're going to do is walk away and find a better place to do that. Follow your conscience about that. In terms of demonstrations, it's a very similar situation. You follow your conscience. You engage where you think you must. I, I've been in demonstrations where honestly I just have run away and hidden from the police because that feels like the safest thing to do. And you know, the we know that the police aren't going to follow the law all the time, but it's always good to understand what your resources are. Most of the time, when you are in a demonstration, there's going to be some legal support for you. It's good to know what that legal support is. Now, I saw a hand go up, and here's how I'm thinking we're going to work this. I'm going to say a few comments, then I'm going to give it to Terry. He's going to say a few comments, and then we're going to open it up to question and answers. I know there's questions about this stuff. So the third place that free speech issues come into play for us commonly is on the internet. And you know, personally, I have a rule of thumb, and that is don't put it in writing if it's at all controversial. Whatever you write, whatever you put in the on the internet has a life, and that life is forever. It's going to outlive you. And in these days of AI, somebody can manipulate that. Now, how do you keep from being completely crippled and silenced on the internet? I think we all make our choices about how much we want to say. I generally will reread something. I do not hesitate to make statements and make comments. I never make personal comments to people. I don't ever make comments that can be misconstrued as a threat to anybody. But you know, you can state your opinion, you can be straight, you can be honest, you can say what you think. And I encourage folks to do that, but also to remember that whatever is written down is going to be permanent, in particular if it's on the internet. So those are a few of the personal kind of situations that I have found myself in. You know, we all have to deal sometimes with trolls that really punch your buttons, and you really want to respond to that. For me, it's just a waste of time. And I have had some people say some very, very ugly things to me and about me. And when it's on the internet, you know, I will always just walk away from that. But at the same time, I will say what's on my mind, as I think most of you who know me know that, and work towards a bigger structural change in our government and in our political landscape to really change what the political landscape is, to keep it open and to keep it free. So those are my personal comments. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to my co-presenter, Terry Lodge, who is a longtime friend of mine. And Terry has over 40 years of experience as an anti-war activist and civil and environmental rights litigator. bringing challenges in support of direct democracy, community rights, and the rights of nature in Ohio. He also supports efforts to resist the spread of nuclear power, nuclear weapons, and nuclear waste nationwide, and provides criminal and civil law representation to environmental and civil rights protesters. He supports the return to democratic roots in order to resist climate chaos and to truly create an equitable society. So here's Mr. Terry Lodge.
Thank you very much, Anita. Um, we have a lot to cover today, and I'm going to try to not monopolize the hour and 4 minutes that we have left. I'm going to try to maximize the possibilities for questions and answers, because the whole matter of political free speech is a gigantic and involved and complex issue. So, as I think everyone in this webinar knows, we're in a very inflamed time. Um, Congressional Democrats and Republicans, both in a grand bipartisan charade, are in many respects leading the way to shut down free speech by, among other things, backing the use of police to close pro-Palestinian encampments on campuses. When you have Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and their ilk condemning those who oppose war and genocide, and those old farts who are incidentally even older than I am, saying that the opposition is funded by Iran or Russia, or that the opposition to the genocide are acting as useful idiots for our enemies, you know you are the sane one. I want to talk about what the dividing line between free speech and illegal speech is. It's actually rather simple. You've crossed the line when you advocate violence that is possible or likely to happen almost immediately. Anything less than that is free speech. Expressions of opinion, even thoroughly ignorant ones, are perfectly lawful to make. It is completely legal, for instance, to say the Jews own all the banks and control Hollywood. It's stupid, bigoted, bad taste, idiotic perhaps, but it is lawful. It is free speech. It's also completely legal to say the Israelis are conducting a genocide, which is a far more factually based and appropriate conclusion, but and is of course also free speech. It's also free speech to say Israeli settlements in the West Bank are illegal and must not only end, but be handed over to Palestine. Or Israel's a criminal apartheid state that came into being illegally without the consent of Palestinians. Or the Nakba was a murderous genocidal series of collective punishments by Zionist Jews against Arabs living in Palestine in the late 40s. These are all, of course, legitimate statements. I'm not trying to tell you that that's the limits, that those are the kinds of things that you must say. I am pointing them out because these kinds of statements are being absurdly and ridiculously outlawed and punished on college and university campuses, in places of private employment, and even in public spaces and public meetings. A word about hate crimes. Hate crime legislation was a trendy thing that began in the 80s, and it became a means of kind of adding on or multiplying punishment. But more than that, to those of us who have done criminal defense, it becomes a hook for the cops to conduct investigations. They suspect that you've used hate speech, and somehow, whatever the hell that is, they begin to dig around, and it is open season on talking to all of the members of your family and your acquaintances and friends and people who don't know you and your enemies, all trying to just investigate you, maybe not even seriously prosecute you. But I'm rather generally opposed to most hate crime laws, partly because existing criminal punishments are oftentimes quite adequate to deal with the underlying wrongdoing. And as I say, adding the hate crime dimension politicizes and implies societal values, and those societal values often threaten speech and may limit speech. And as I think most everyone on this webinar knows, the leftists are the ones who usually get smacked down first when there are repressive new laws put into effect. So there are some limits on free speech. If you tell lies in the course of your speech or falsely destroy someone's reputation, you might have to pay civil damages if they sue you for slander or libel. But that's a difficult case to make for the most part. And it's not criminal. It's not the state cracking down on you because of the content of what you're saying. Criminalization of free speech is constantly oozing to the surface in the political dialogue in this country at the state legislative level, even at the local level, and certainly in Congress. There's often talk, and nowadays there's a lot of it, talk making it illegal in the past to join the Communist Party. But nowadays, state governments in particular are going out of their way to advocate boycott, divestment, and sanctions types of activity directed at Israel is illegal conduct. What typically has happened, there's about 32 or more states that have anti-BDS laws on the books. The typical pattern is that you are, if you support or advocate or even dare mention the word boycott Israel, you can be cut out of receiving a benefit conferred by the state. That can mean, among other things, you can be denied, supposedly, you can be denied SNAP benefits, you can be denied food benefits, other kinds of social welfare benefits, as well as if you are doing business or intending to try to do business, bidding on the hundreds or thousands of things that state governments let contracts for, including selling lottery tickets, including redeeming of SNAP benefits, that sort of thing. That can put you in the crosshairs and you can be made ineligible for those benefits. But it is unconstitutional for a state government or Congress to deny a governmental benefit based on what they want you to say or think. At least for now, it's unconstitutional. The Supreme Court there are a few very disturbing hints and signs from the U.S. Supreme Court that they are going to take up an appropriate appeal that might destroy the right to boycott. The right to vote with your checkbook, vote with your wallet, vote not to buy things, vote not to do business with somebody, which is essentially a personally discretionary type of act, is increasingly being scrutinized by the right-wingers and the proto-fascists of the U.S. Supreme Court as possibly something that should be cut out from under First Amendment protections. The First Amendment is more than speech. It's a First Amendment activity to associate with people of a similar belief pattern as yours. It is, of course, press freedom is a First Amendment value, as is religious freedom. But the right to associate and the right to speak, even anonymously, on a topic, these are all sort of the subunits of the First Amendment. And I will not be surprised if the Supreme Court tries to seriously undercut the right of boycott as an act of free speech expression. And to give you, just to kind of bring it home to you even more, in 2018, the Israel Anti-Boycott Act was introduced in the Congress. It was a proposed anti-BDS law that was designed to allow essentially U.S. states to enact laws requiring contractors, the things I've described, basically would add federal congressional approval to the free speech blocking acts of the 32 or so states that have statutes on the books forbidding opposing BDS. But it also would have made it a federal crime punishable by a maximum sentence of 20 years imprisonment for American citizens to encourage or participate in boycotts against Israel and Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. And this wasn't just a couple of fringe dudes, although most of Congress and the Senate certainly would qualify. 58 of 100 senators co-sponsored this legislation. And out of the, and it was bipartisan, of course. There were 58 co-sponsors in the Senate, 292 out of 435 co-sponsors in the House, 216 Republicans, 76 Dems. The act died in Congress. There was strong pushback from a number of free speech organizations that, at least at the time, caused reconsideration of that. However, that was 2018. It wasn't quite as supercharged of a political and repressive atmosphere as we are presently enduring. I want to talk also about anti-Semitism, which is a term that has been distorted, cheapened, and basically denuded of any serious meaning. As I indicated earlier, anti-Semitic speech, flatly, baldly, openly, anti-Semitic speech is completely lawful under the Ohio Constitution, which has a free speech clause, as well as the First Amendment. Incidentally, for those who, I don't think Anita made it clear, she and I are both in Toledo, Northwest Ohio. Right now, there are, as we've been listening to or seeing or witnessing or even being the brunt of, depending on what your activities may have been in opposition to the ongoing genocide in Gaza, there are many attempts to criminalize or at least use as a basis for punishment anyone's even correct, factual, proven, established statements that in any way oppose the unfettered, murderous activity of the government of Israel. There is a great deal of blurring and distortion, and the problem is that people bear the punishment before any sanity might intrude. For instance, I'm representing a woman who gave a benediction at a May graduation commencement ceremony at a university in Ohio, and she had already edited her benediction to delete any express reference to the ongoing genocide. She is Palestinian, and as she walked off the stage, she showed an 8.5 by 11-inch sized Palestinian flag. It has completely destroyed her enrollment at that institution for graduate school. And it's incredible. It's an incredible overreach. It's an incredible, the idea of destroying someone's career for a brief and non-disruptive act of free speech is kind of the standard that we're looking at these days in America. So we're going to have a little quiz here. What I'm going to do is read statements, and I want everyone to feel free, if they wish, to participate by using the raise hand feature in Zoom. I will read the statement and ask a couple of questions after it and ask for people to, raise their hand if they agree and not raise their hand if they don't agree. So let me try this one. And this is kind of a long statement. I want you to tell me at the end. I'll ask you if you think that this is dangerous free speech that should be criminally punished. And we fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And I say this despite all that's happened. The best is yet to come. So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to the Capitol and we're going to try and give. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. So how many people think that that is imminently lawless free speech? Show of hands. Good. This is a good class, good group. It's not. Those were, okay, we have one, but I suspect that one knows what those words are from. Those are excerpts from the January 6th, 2021 speech by Trump just before the mob descended on the Capitol building. And he, among other things, used the word peacefully. And as much as I detest him personally, that was free speech. It was protected. I don't, even though there was a lot of rumbling at the time, and even still about punishing him for incitement. That's a tough one. That's it's going to be a hard case to make, and I think that it's kind of a waste of time. Another one. The police are racist, violent enemies of the people. How many people believe that that is hate speech? Good. How many people think that it is imminently dangerous and someone should be arrested for even saying it? Well, you guys don't need this webinar at all. This is great. Very good. The police are racist, violent enemies of the people. Let's teach them a lesson right now. Let's make them leave us alone. How many people think that is an incitement and is possibly criminally punishable? Yeah. It's borderline, but it's really, really, really right up to that border. Okay. And incidentally, a lot of these are gray area. They're not, uh, it's difficult. It's a tough call. How about the police are racist, violent enemies of the people? Off the pigs. Everybody like that one? Okay, again, close, close. You can tell I'm having fun with this. The Zionist settlements in the West Bank are illegal as hell. Is that free speech, or should somebody lose their... Okay. The International Court of Justice are the useful idiots of Hezbollah and Hamas that are movements out to destroy Israel. Free speech, criminal, hate speech. Maybe I'm asking too many questions at once.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, are we raising our hands if we think it's free speech, or are we raising our hands if we think it's illegal?
Good criticism. I'll frame the questions a little bit more cleanly. The Jews are destroying Gaza. How many think that that is criminal? How many think it is? Okay, one. Anybody else? How many think it is um, it is free speech? Yeah. Okay. How many genuinely don't know at this point? Not sure. How about the Jews are destroying Gaza? Hitler had the right idea. How many feel that that is free speech? See, Leanne has a hand up, so I think she's voting. Okay. All right. How many don't know? I may think it is simply not free speech, that it should not be allowed, I guess is what I'm asking. Okay, this is good. I think we've kind of gotten some people thinking. about the issues. There's one more thing I want to say, and this is a really distressing aspect of what is going on. It is that we have these huge multinational corporations, um, such as whatever the hell they're calling Facebook, these Meta, is it? And Google, and a lot of the other large information harvesting firms. Um, Effectively, in this society, free speech in many respects has been privatized. And that's wrong. It's been privatized because we leave it, for God's sake, to Mark Zuckerberg's CIA ex-employees to monitor and make little internal rulings as to whether something should be banned, whether you said something incorrect that doesn't meet their interpretation of community standards. There has been a movement on, or at least a theme that has recurred a few times in Congress, that these giant corporations should be regulated by the federal and or state governments in order to force them to have an unfettered free speech policy. Again, history shows time and time and time and time over and over that when new restrictions come down, they land the hardest on leftists, on progressives, on people who are talking about a change of direction. And the fact that we allow a huge amount of our communication and dialogue to be supervised and commercialized and harvested by corporations is an extremely dangerous and foolish thing. Um, for instance, we are seeing thousands of examples a day, I'm sure, of censorship when people say the wrong thing about the ongoing genocide. Um, it should not be for me to have to pit my opinion against Zuckerberg's CIA employees as to which of us has the appropriate perspective of the bloodshed that is going on uninterrupted. Anyway, I'm fine to take questions if people or help steer a discussion, however people want to proceed. If you want to put questions in the chat, please feel free to do so, or pull up your hand, and unless there's a huge crowd of people that all want to talk at once, hold up your hand and let's just do it that way.
No questions? Oh, okay. Leanne and then
Robert
Robert.
was first. Robert
Oh,
was
Robert
first.
was first. Okay, Robert, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Doesn't really matter, but thank you. Terry, I was just wondering, you talked a good deal about free speech in terms of what is actually free speech and what is punishable speech. And some of the questions were phrased a little funny, so I wasn't sure which way to go with it. But my question is, I didn't think any of the examples that you gave were wrong or should be punished. I felt that it all should be covered by free speech. And my question to you is, what's your take on that?
My take is that all of them, some of them go very close to the line, but all of them are effectively probably permissible free speech. The problem, of course, is how much time and how deep can you go in terms of defending yourself if you end up being prosecuted or civilly sued and joined. And that Anita kind of touched a lot upon the practicality of whether you want to make a certain scenario the proverbial hill that you want to die on or not. And in effect, there are a lot of cues to chill free speech in this society,
Oh,
which
yes.
is, among other things, what I think the hate crimes laws do rather effectively. But it's a
Thank
good,
you.
very good question.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Leanne?
Thank you. A term that many of us in North Carolina noticed in recent months was the term modern anti-Semitism, especially because our North Carolina representative, Virginia Fox, ran that House hearing, calling in all the university presidents about the demonstrations on public campuses. And of course, two of our University of North Carolina campuses had encampments that were shut down. And we kept hearing this term, modern anti-Semitism. They're still trying to figure out what to do with these students. But are we going to see that concept embraced in legislation at state or federal levels? I guess my concern is Fox and others are defining it as a situation where others are just put in fear of what I don't know, but people are in fear of peaceful demonstrations on campus, and that's why they're being shut down. Thanks for your comment.
Good question. The answer is yes. There are, I think, several congressional attempts right now pending. They may go nowhere, but there is and have been a couple of serious attempts for Congress to adopt a definition of anti-Semitism, which is effectively anything negative you say about Israel is anti-Semitic because they are a theocratic nation. Therefore, you are impugning them, et cetera, et cetera. That's the new modern anti-Semitism, which is any congressional person that has been bought by AIPAC is trying to define any dissent, no matter how factual, how legitimate, and how reality-based, is illegal. It's not the law yet, and I would like to think that even the Supreme Court would agree that it is too repressive, but I don't think I can legitimately make that sort of statement about the proto-fascists of the Supreme Court. So yes, it may happen. It isn't the law now. It's certainly the trend. And I also must say that among the most courageous people in our anti-genocide and anti-war movements are the young ones who, notwithstanding all of the possible penalties, are still there, and they are still hanging tough and very bravely, which is why I also believe in lending as much support as possible.
Okay, I saw Henry had his hand up. Go ahead, Henry.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a question about petitioning for ballot access. I'm in Massachusetts, where that is a constitutionally protected right by the Massachusetts state constitution, and it's also a free speech issue. Most of the supermarkets I went to, I had no problem. The managers, when I approached them ahead of time to just be nice about it, totally understood what I was doing. One never returned my calls at headquarters. That was BJ's. And another, though I got permission by one manager, several weeks later, another manager told me that he called headquarters, this was Aldi's, and told me that if I didn't leave, I'd be arrested. So I had plenty of other places to go, and I didn't pick a fight, and I'm not about to hire a lawyer or get arrested over this. But I felt like I didn't have a lot I could do to appeal this. I called the Secretary of State's office, and they said, yes, it is protected, but it's up to you how far you want to go with this. And I called the landowner corporation for the people who rent out the space to the supermarket. And I made a complaint verbally to them. They said they'd look into it, and I never heard back from them. So we're at the mercy of these places. And when you're trying to get ballot access, there are only a few places you can go to, at least in my neck of the woods. So do you have any comments about this?
I have a question. Massachusetts has a constitutional provision that says what then?
That that getting ballot access, getting signatures for ballot access is constitutionally protected.
But it's not constitutionally protected. Does it say it's constitutionally protected even on private property?
That's a good question.
It probably does not. And
well, it
that's
specifically says supermarkets, because that's our marketplace. I mean, where else am I going to get signatures? And if I went door to door, that would take forever. We had to get 10,000 signatures in Massachusetts in 5.5 months.
Yeah, I understand and agree that it's what should be happening. The great disintegration happened or began happening in the 60s with the enclosure of what used to be traditional downtowns in the form of malls.
Right.
And the mallification of free speech made it possible, with a very few interesting exceptions, for private property owners to simply exclude petitioning. The problem for them being, if they opened it up for some kind of petitioning activity, they'd have to open it up for everybody.
Right.
And I litigated a couple of those things 45 years ago. It is an ongoing problem, and one that kind of defies easy resolution. What we have tried to do in local initiative and referendum activities in Ohio is gather outside of busy public workplaces, governmental buildings, and to some extent, depending on the actual physical configuration of a private business, sometimes the sidewalks and the accessibility to traffic, foot and vehicular going in and out, lends itself to gathering signatures. But it's a very tough issue. Absolutely.
I might add, in my part of the world, in rural Massachusetts, we don't have such a thing as that.
Okay.
We don't have busy places.
It is what we have resorted to also here in Ohio. And I've done a lot of petitioning and been chased off of a lot of places. But like I said, I think your approach was very clever, because you did ask, you did go in and you do it. A lot of times that's what I will do. I mean, honestly, I don't ask. I just go in and it takes them a minute to chase you off. And sometimes you're able to get signatures before they do that. But if there can be a sidewalk, a lot of times we use libraries. Libraries tend to be very amenable to this type of thing, and they have some foot traffic, but it is hard to get all those signatures. We use sidewalks a lot, but like you said, if that's not available to you, but I have found that sometimes, like for instance, we have tried to petition on the sidewalk outside of Ohio State University, and we have been told that the university actually owns the sidewalk and we can't petition there. We have to cross the street. And, again, do we challenge this? We don't, we can only do so much, but I feel like it's all wrong. And I think that getting people in office is crucial, and they're not going to make it easy. They're going to make it hard so that we cannot get those petitions signed, but we do it anyway. And I think that most people who we come up to usually are not interested anyway, but we just need to keep pushing. We keep doing it and not take no for an answer. So thank you, Henry, for doing that and for pushing those boundaries. And yes, our good speech should last forever on the internet, but it's when we are angry and we feel discouraged, which frankly I have at times, and when we want to lash out. For myself, those are the things I do not want to enshrine it for posterity. So did that answer your questions, Henry?
Yes, I just might make a comment. I don't really ask the supermarket. I say, I know this is constitutionally protected activity. I just want to let you know as a courtesy that I'm going to be outside your store tomorrow. It's asking, but not really asking.
Excellent. Okay, so Elizabeth Green has been waiting very patiently.
Thank you. Dr. Jill Stein has said arms embargo against Israel. Is that a boycott that's illegal? I mean, it's lawful. I mean, what she says is totally lawful.
It is totally lawful, even in a state that would say that it is not. It's support for a boycott, and it absolutely is protected free speech statement. The problem is, folks, is that the burden is put on the wrongfully accused supposed violator to vindicate themselves. That is a problem. Litigation takes a long time. Sometimes judges make stupid or overtly ideological decisions, and you end up having to do battle for a long time over something that is actually rather clear. And that is a growing, incipient problem that is right in our faces now during this incredible time where most of Congress is owned by AIPAC, by millions of dollars of campaign donations, and where I was amazed. Pardon me, I'm segueing. Just want to say I was absolutely amazed at the university presidents of prestigious schools who, instead of telling Congress it's free speech, this is what colleges and universities exist to teach students about expression and about dialogue and about exchanging ideas and about peaceful discussion. Get over it. I'm not changing a damn thing. Instead, particularly the Columbia president who just resigned in a semi-disgraced state, they go back and they turn the cops on to the encampments. It's simply amazing that they double down. And these are the prestigious money universities of our country. Pretty amazing stuff is happening. And this is, to some extent, unprecedented. There were very similar battles being fought during the Vietnam era, where there were many attempts to criminalize opposition to the war. They say that the First Amendment is only valuable when it's being invoked, when it's being used. And that's pretty true.
Okay, any other questions, folks?
Follow-ups, anything?
One thing I wanted to add is I know I mentioned that our Latinx caucus co-chair was had been under investigation. He was actually charged with a hate crime. And it's my understanding that he was found innocent. So, but he was frightened enough that he stepped back from doing political activity. And I think that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid that kind of fear. And I'm very pleased that he is coming back, and he I believe was found not guilty. I think he actually went to trial for this, and I think that is the ploy that the government uses to intimidate people. And it was what he was saying was stuff about Gaza, and he was charged with being anti-Semitic. And he was making some of that speech, like Terry mentioned, comes right up to the edge. Nonetheless, that was his right. And I was very proud that he would do that. But at the same time, it occurred to me, because he was very frightened, and he did reach out to the rest of the caucus members initially. And one of the things that I figured out, because we were trying to help him out with some of this, is that the National Lawyers Guild, if you go to their website, they have a good pamphlet about what to do if the FBI comes knocking. And they say very frankly, don't let them in. Don't talk to them and don't let them in. And I would like Terry to maybe say a few words about that if he's familiar with the National Lawyers Guild pamphlet on
Sure.
what to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I am. I just, Anita, I also see that there are some questions we probably ought to answer that are in the chat too, which is where I told people to post them. I'll talk
Okay, let
about
me see if I can find those. Sorry. I'll look in the
one of
chat.
them. Well, one of them was by Kathy, who said, "Is there a line where you call for harm, as in Hitler had the right solution?" And you actually have to examine the circumstances where the statement's made. If there's a bunch of neo-Nazis and a bunch of anarchists facing off, and one of the neo-Nazis at the podium says Hitler had the right solution, and it becomes an instant fight kind of line, then obviously that was, in retrospect, something that the police would have been expected to intervene in immediately after, and they probably do, and they start clubbing the anarchists. They represent a lot of anarchists. Um, wow. Also, the person who asks, Maureen asks, there's a question, or pardon me, an adage that I may not like what you say, but I'll fight to the death for you to say it. That's a paraphrasing. It used to be believed that that was a statement made by the writer Voltaire to another writer in France in the late 18th century named Helvetius. I don't know if that is accurate anymore. I've seen, it all depends on what you believe on the web. I've seen the statement attributed to a woman writer in the early 20th century. So I'm not sure who said it, but it's a good, it's a sort of a nice adage to hold in your mind as you consider the dialogue. The problem is that we often are emotionally committed in our statements, and we wish that the other side would just shut the hell up, to say it nicely. And but that's not the way it works. And in fact, the wisdom of having robust free speech is that it, as the courts have said, it sands off the rough corners of our ideas and understanding. That the way to exchange ideas is to get them all out there and talk about it, and try to talk about it in as civil a way as you can muster. And please note that dialogue is often the solution to things like, oh, I don't know, wars. But nobody wants to have dialogue. Nobody wants to negotiate or renegotiate treaties against nuclear weapons usage. Nobody wants to talk. We all want to avoid coming to grips as a planetary collective. And free speech has to be respected and upheld as perhaps the highest civil value. Anyway, I'll stop diatribing. I see there are other questions I'm going to look at. So far as the Know Your Rights thing, there's a very good Know Your Rights pamphlet that you can download and print out and distribute at the National Lawyers Guild website. It is periodically updated. It has a lot of good advice, and it's very plainly expressed. As Anita said, don't talk to the FBI if you can avoid it at all, because the FBI are often there to intimidate as much as to investigate.
Okay, we have Ron Garcia, and then we're going to answer Cindy's question that's on the chat. Go ahead, Ron.
Can you hear me, or should I?
You're good.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I was just sorry I got here late, so I missed most of the workshop, so I apologize. And I'm not sure if this is outside of the scope of this workshop. I just posted it in the chat. Just wondering in terms of free speech in Latin America, because that is a pretty big issue in several countries in Latin America right now. And, if that's something the Green Party has, been doing any work on recently. I know there was a solidarity delegation to Venezuela at one point, but and I was not, let's say, not in agreement with the stance that, that was taken in that regard, but just wondering, yeah, if there's any work on the Latinx caucus in that regard right now. Thank you.
There
That's
is
your
not
question,
right
Anita.
now. We are, I'll be very frank with you. We would love for you to join us. And yes, we have been in the past, or currently, we're very supportive of most leftist governments in Latin America, including Venezuela. But we also, like I said, our one co-chair stepped back because he was being investigated by the FBI. That left a very small core group of people. There were a couple other things happening. So we're trying very hard to rebuild the caucus. And I would encourage anybody to reach out to me, rhannon@toast.net. That's my email address. But I'm pretty easy to find. And get involved. We really need the voices of diversity for the Latinx caucus, because we are not a homogeneous community. We come from lots of different places with lots of different points of view, and we want to hear those points of view. And so no, we are not doing an awful lot with that at the moment. We're spread very thin. Even pulling together this workshop was kind of a challenge for us. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I see Cindy had asked in the chat, do you think that we will eventually outlaw physical forms of protest, such as wearing a keffiyeh or having a Palestinian flag hanging on your front porch? Terry?
I used to ridicule such ridiculous possibilities. They're no longer ridiculous. We've seen the Supreme Court basically admit, or I guess I would say coronate, the presidency as being above the law. Actually, in about 2010 or 2011, it must have been 2012 or beyond, I guess, when Obama signed a National Defense Authorization Act bill that essentially empowered the president to hold people indefinitely, even for life, without charge. We are seeing all kinds of things around the periphery that are erasing and destroying our civic and civil rights. And so anything's possible, Cindy. It's no longer ridiculous. I apologize for ever thinking for a minute that there was that our problem is that we don't have effective reinforcement of our common values in this society. And in fact, a lot of them are not allowed to be taught. Increasingly, state legislatures are outlawing um, uh, topical areas that can even be taught in the schools. There's a great deal of censorship going on. We have a theocratically inclined Supreme Court. We have tremendous right-wing, conservative, predominantly Christian dominance of much of our politics, and they have found common ground with the Zionists that are distributing millions of dollars into our federal political system, and even below the federal political system. So anything can happen. Vigilance is about our only weapon.
I also wanted to point out that Terry put the link to the National Lawyers Guild pamphlet, Know Your Rights, in the chat. So do check that out. Any other questions for us? Or anything that people would like to share about your experiences on the front lines? I mean, we do not intend to step back. We are going to keep pushing the boundaries. And in a way, that's sort of our job. But to actually get people elected to office that can change this climate, I feel has to ultimately be our goal, is to change the people who are in government. Elizabeth Green?
Does Israel, as a theocracy, have more rights than another country that isn't? And there's a really good question in the chat about the Latinx caucus and our voice on the global Greens.
Israel has no greater right to exist than any other country. And just because it's a theocracy certainly doesn't lend any great legitimacy or credence to it. The problem is that a lot of Americans, particularly in positions of political power, believe that somehow Israel should have an elevated status. And as I have repeated a few times, I think that that's basically a purchased point of view, campaign donor bought. We have the best Congress that AIPAC could amass. Yeah, and there also is a question I saw from Rita, and I can't scroll. Come on, can't get this thing to scroll.
Also, Elizabeth, are you did you refer to your question about do Greens have any right to be in the American Federation of Green Parties? Is that the question you were referring to, Elizabeth?
Yeah, affirmative.
Okay, so just to say a little bit about that. The short answer is no, because several years ago, the National Committee, not based on any recommendations by the Latinx caucus, but rather a recommendation by the International Committee, it was recommended that we pull out of the Green Party, the American Federation of Green Parties, because there's some very conservative folks in that group. Nonetheless, I guess my personal opinion is you have dialogue with people you disagree with. But that's not what we're doing right now. The other thing is that the National Committee voted to become a part of the Sao Paulo Forum, but we aren't doing that either. There's a very, very long discussion about that. And to cut to the chase on this is that the Latinx caucus did not take a position on whether or not we should withdraw from the Federation of American Green Parties. I think most of us would like us to participate in it, but that's not our decision alone. We only have 2 votes on the National Committee. It was a vote of the National Committee that did that. So nonetheless, as I would reiterate, we are looking for new members. So anybody who identifies as Latinx or Hispanic or Latino or Latina is welcome to join us. And there was another question, Terry?
Yes, Rita has raised in chat, have you talked about free speech inside the Green Party? There have been some issues off bounds and some Greens have been silenced or thrown out of the party for expressing them. I want to say this much. I haven't examined the Green Party bylaws, but political parties often as effectively they're private in the sense that they are not a governmental entity. And free speech is the way the First Amendment is worded is that the government basically cannot restrict or limit free speech. Other entities and organizations, depending on circumstances, can. And particularly if political parties are trying to formulate an effective statement of a policy or a platform. But okay, without having any specifics, Rita, that's just my general observation. And Anita, if you want to comment, being more familiar with the bylaws.
Okay, so I would say the Green Party has some very specific ideology. We don't fit everybody. That's a reality. We have some values that that we try very hard to adhere to, and I know that there was a big problem with the Georgia Green Party making some anti-trans statements, and that doesn't fit with our values. And I don't know beyond that of any other specifics. I know that there was a big problem with that, and then some Green parties were also censured because they did not follow the rules, which were to put our candidate on their ballot and put a different candidate on their ballot. But so those are the things that I would say. We are, by and large, here in the United States, the Green Party is a very leftist party. We have very leftist positions, and we don't hide from those positions. We're a very pro-Palestinian group. We support the right to return. We have for many years. Before this stuff was happening in Gaza, we supported the Palestinian struggle. We see it as a fight against colonialism. We have always seen that. We have had some knockdown, drag out fights about some of our policy and about some of our internal struggles, and I'm sure we will continue to have those. We will evolve and we will change as we must, but as I see it, and this is my personal subjective point of view, and I don't speak for the National Committee or anybody else, but my personal feeling is that by and large, Greens stick by their values. That means that sometimes people don't fit here. So that's all I have to say about that. And I see Elizabeth has another question.
Terry, can you give us your phone number in case we get in trouble? We can call you.
I don't think that's really very fair. There's only one of him. And I suppose I would say that if you're in Ohio or in this area, that might be a reasonable request. Otherwise, let's not overwhelm the lawyer.
I know. Thank you.
Is flattered. You've got I put my email address right up at the top. Lodgelaw, one word, at yahoo.com. And these days I've been very beleaguered in doing anti-nuclear weapons and anti-genocide work with the Veterans for Peace. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Happy to answer any other questions. And incidentally, that's why I did give you my email address. If people do have follow-ups or if things come up, I'm a member of the, for what it's worth, I'm a member of the National Lawyers Guild, and also know other movement attorneys who just in various places around the country that I've networked with and litigated things with, that sort of thing, and trying to hand off the torch to younger lawyers too.
I have a quick question.
Anita,
Anita,
is this Henry again?
no, this is Ron.
Okay, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could address the conservative slant of some of the Green parties in the Americas. I'm mostly familiar with the one in Mexico, which I know has very problematic stances, to say the least. And I knew of the one in Nicaragua, but I'm not really that familiar with many of the other ones.
Actually, The Green Party in Mexico supports things that we don't support here, and such as capital punishment. And yes, they were also part of the government that enacted some rather restricted rules. But since that is off topic for this discussion, I would invite you to join us in the Latinx caucus, and we can have some discussions about this and, flesh this out a little bit more for the caucus. I think that's an important conversation to have, just perhaps not in this forum. Okay. Okay. Now, who else had their hand up? I see Henry again. Go ahead, Henry.
Harry, can I run this by you? So Google was just found to be guilty of antitrust. What do you think of finding the Democratic Party guilty of antitrust?
Unfortunately, they're not covered by the Sherman Act. They'd have to be, although what they do is anti-competitive behavior. You're right. They act to squeeze out smaller parties,
Yep.
and punish them and sue them. There was a huge lawsuit 20 odd years ago against the Ohio Green Party by the Dems. Yes, the Dems are frenemies at best.
Oh, any other questions? Okay, well, this has been a very wonderful discussion, and I have to tell you all, I am so proud of the work that you all do. I know you stand up and you do this, you take your own time, and this is such important work that we all do in our states. And thank you so much for caring enough to do this. Okay.
I would just like to thank Anita and Terry for conducting this workshop today, and for all of you for being here today and engaging in this discussion. This is our last set of workshops for the day, and as you all know, there are many more activities over the next couple of days. So I hope you enjoy and learn lots, and we'll see you at these events.
Thank you, folks.
And thank you to Terry Lodge for always coming through and always standing with us. Have a good day, everybody.